Beneath the room where American representative government was born in 1619 lies a hidden grave. A knight's tombstone marks it, its carved face worn to nothing. For years, every clue pointed to one man, Sir George Yeardley, the governor who convened that first legislature. The case felt airtight. Then, in January 2025, a DNA test erased his name from the coffin below, leaving a mystery that cuts deeper than anyone expected. A trench opened beneath layers of brick and concrete in 2018 revealed the contours of a grave unlike any other in the old church's chancel. The cut measured 6 feet by 3 feet, wide and deep enough to suggest privilege, far beyond the cramped pits reserved for most of Jamestown's dead. The soil outlined the faint hexagon of a coffin, its sides once shaped from white oak, joined with dovetails and iron nails now rusted to dust. To me, the care in that construction speaks of someone whose death mattered, at least to those with the means to mark it. The skeleton inside told its own story. The bones belonged to a European male, late 30s to early 40s, standing about 5 feet 9 inches. Teeth showed the kind of decay you would expect from a diet rich in wheat and meat, not the rough grains and hard labor that ground down the jaws of ordinary settlers. The limbs were straight, joints smooth, no signs of the arthritis that plagued workers. A healed injury on the left shin hinted at a life spent on horseback or in combat, not in the fields. All of this points to someone of the elite. Chemical traces in the bone added another layer. Isotope analysis showed a mix of C3 and C4 plants, wheat, some maize, and plenty of animal protein. Lead levels measured 13 micrograms per gram, far above what you would see in most people of the time. That, to me, suggests pewter plates and imported ceramics, the tableware of the elite. Lying above the grave, a black limestone slab, Belgian stone, carved with a chevron and 3 roses, once displayed the image of a knight in armor. Now the face is worn smooth, the brass inlays long vanished. There is something haunting about that, a vanished face above a vanished name, both erased by centuries of footsteps and salt air. Yet, the physical clues all point to someone who stood at the very top of colonial society, buried at the symbolic heart of the first government's church. Inside the choir of the 1617 church, the First General Assembly of Virginia met on July 30th, 1619. It is a detail that does not always land with the force it deserves, but to me, standing in that space, knowing what happened there, feels like touching the pulse of American political history. John Pori, the Assembly's secretary and speaker, kept a careful record of the proceedings, his journal spelling out the names of the burgesses, the reading of statutes, and even the opening prayer from Reverend Richard Buck. The words Buck chose, invoking the holy place of worship where the governor and council do assemble, tie the sacred and the civic together in a way that is hard to ignore. The Assembly passed laws on everything from tobacco prices to Sabbath observance, but what matters most, I think, is that this was the first fully representative legislature in English North America. 16 months before the Mayflower Compact, elected burgesses and councillors were already debating policy in this choir beneath a thatched roof and rough timber beams. The Great Charter of 1618 had set the stage, but it was here in the chancel that the abstract promise of self-government became real. One entry in Pori's minutes stands out: the sudden death and burial of Walter Shelley, a council member whose body was interred right there in the choir. The fact that the Assembly paused for his burial, then resumed its work above his grave, gives the room a kind of gravity that is hard to shake. To me, this is not just a church floor, it is the foundation of American representative government, layered directly over the bones of those who shaped it. Sir George Yeardley seemed to fit the grave like a key in a lock. He was governor of Virginia in 1619, knighted by King James, the man who called the First General Assembly to order in the very choir where this burial lies, and his presence in the chancel felt almost inevitable. The biography lines up. Yeardley survived the Sea Venture shipwreck, rose through the colonial ranks, and by the time he died in November 1627, he was one of the wealthiest and most powerful men in the colony. The will he left behind, written in 1620 and probated in 1628, does not spell out a burial location, but there is a strong hint in a 1679 reference. Adam Thorogood II, a step-grandson by marriage, directed that a Yeardley coat of arms tombstone be set in the chancel of the Church of the Colony. For years, that single phrase tied the knight's tombstone, Belgian black limestone with a chevron and 3 roses, to Yeardley's memory. The circumstantial evidence piled up. The skeleton's age, social status, and diet matched what you would expect from a colonial governor. The timing was perfect. Yeardley died just as the church was still the center of Jamestown's civic and spiritual life. And then there is the historical weight. This was the man who, just months before, had authorized the purchase of 20 and odd Negroes from the White Lion in August 1619, a transaction that marked the beginning of African slavery in English North America. Every time I read through those records, the case felt more and more airtight. The grave, the tombstone, the timing, the power, everything seemed to point to Yeardley. In my opinion, it was as close to certainty as you get in early American history, and for a long time, I did not see how it could be anyone else. A single bone, sliced from the petrous part of the skull, made its way from a climate-controlled vault in Jamestown to the FBI laboratory at Quantico. The petrous is the densest bone in the human body. If DNA survives anywhere after 4 centuries, it is there. The lab followed strict protocols, cleanroom suits, UV sterilized tools, and negative controls at every step to rule out contamination. What they were after was not nuclear DNA, which rarely endures in this kind of context, but mitochondrial DNA, passed down unchanged from mother to child, generation after generation. That is the genetic thread they needed to test the Yeardley hypothesis. Genealogist Dave Annell had spent years tracing the female line from Sir George Yeardley's sister, Catherine, across 17 generations. 10 living descendants agreed to take part. Buccal swabs arrived at Quantico, each one a capsule of maternal ancestry. The FBI's analysts sequenced the hypervariable region of the ancient sample, then compared it to the modern profiles, base by base. The result was not even close. Professor Turi King, who had overseen the Richard III identification, reviewed the data and confirmed it. The mitochondrial haplotype from the chancel skeleton did not match any of the Yeardley matrilineal descendants. The statistical confidence exceeded 99.9%. In other words, the man in the grave could not be Sir George Yeardley. The announcement landed on January 7th, 2025, with a kind of forensic finality. No peer-reviewed paper, no technical appendix, just a coordinated press release, a WHRO news segment, and a flurry of headlines echoing Michael Lavin's Maury Povich moment. I have to admit, the abruptness of it all felt strange. 7 years of circumstantial certainty erased by a single genetic mismatch. To me, that is the power of exclusionary science, one test, and the story you thought you knew is suddenly wide open again. And yet, without a published methods section or raw data, part of me still wants to see the receipts. With Yeardley eliminated, the investigation pivots. The evidence that once seemed conclusive now opens new questions, and the search for the man beneath the chancel focuses on Thomas West, 12th Baron Delaware. 2 facts stand out. The black limestone slab above the grave bears a chevron and 3 roses, heraldic symbols found in the Delaware coat of arms. That is not a generic knight's design. It is precise, and it narrows the field. The 1643 council ledger records the burial of the late Sir Thomas West within the chancel of the old church. Surviving records from this era are rare, and this one points directly to the right person, place, and social rank. West died in 1618, and while the details of his body's journey back to Jamestown are sparse, the burial's radiocarbon date fits. Other knighted candidates, Argall, Wyatt, Gates, Dale, Harvey, have been ruled out by time, place, or status. The next steps are mapped out with scientific precision. Y chromosome DNA from the Petrus bone, if it can be recovered, will be compared with living male line descendants of West. Ground-penetrating radar will scan the church footprint for other elite burials that might have been missed. A panel of geneticists, historians, and descendant community representatives is being assembled to set ethical boundaries and review methods. Full peer-reviewed publication of the mitochondrial DNA results is planned, with raw data released for independent scrutiny. Each action comes with a timeline. Science, not speculation, will guide the way. Yet, the larger purpose stretches beyond identifying a single knight. Mariana Hartley has argued that these same genetic tools could one day help restore the identities of the first Africans brought to Jamestown in 1619. These are people whose names were never recorded. The real horizon is refusing to let the story end with the powerful, and insisting that the silences in the record matter as much as the names we recover. What strikes me most is how the vanished name beneath the vanished face leaves us confronting history's blank spaces. Even now, in the birthplace of American democracy, so much remains unidentified, sometimes quite literally. To me, that uncertainty feels like the truest inheritance. Share your theories in the comments.